Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for joining us today. We appreciate you giving us your precious time. My name is Jennifer Sullivan, and I am the Principal Advisor with J. Sullivan Advisors. We welcome you to today's Brain Break featuring Laura Madrid. Our hope is to give you about 30 minutes where you can slow down a bit. Just stop taking care of things and other people. Sit back in your chair and just relax for a bit. By nature, you planners are givers, and we're asking that you turn that off for a little bit and let us give back to you. We have a wonderful and very wise, savvy speaker today on tap, and I look forward to introducing you to Laura shortly. But first, let me tell you a little bit about J. Sullivan Advisors. We are a boutique hospitality consulting firm offering business solutions to hospitality owners and complete event meeting services to meeting professionals. We can do everything from sourcing to site selection to contract negotiations to full event planning to execution or being on site to help with extra staffing. We can do all of that or just pieces of it, whatever you need. I'd say there are two things that make us different than incentive houses or other meeting planning companies. First, like other independent planners, we are very high touch but low overhead. However, we are a team. We're not a one-woman show. If something were to happen to your planner, there are 6 of us on this team, and we certainly back each other up. So you've always got a team working for you. Secondly, I think the thing that makes us different is the very dynamic makeup of our team. We are a mixture of seasoned and savvy planners, and I'll ask my team to turn their cameras on, please. Sharon Chapman and Jana Stern are colleagues of many of you. And then we also have very experienced luxury hoteliers on our team with Michelle Babin, Joanne Peart, and unable to join us today is Kelly Wood-Starmer, who is also a very active part of our team. So we are all strategists, we're relationship builders, and we're magic makers. We are all passionate about travel. We are passionate about building loyalty through events, and we are passionate about taking care of other people, be that your stakeholders, your attendees, or you. So we would love to put our passions to work for you. And help and put our experiences to work for you as well. I'll send you a follow-up email tomorrow so that we can stay in touch. And then whenever you need to supplement your staff or your team, please think of J. Sullivan Advisors and let me know how we can be of service. So now it is my extreme pleasure to introduce you to somebody else who is equally as passionate about travel, Laura Madrid. Laura is the owner of Resort to Laura Madrid, which is a highly specialized travel consultancy with an emphasis on authentic, adventure, exotic, and luxury travel. Laura specializes in the leisure segment, and I asked her to join us today because historically, when travel has slowed down in the past, it's leisure that rebounds first. So as group planners, we look to our leisure partners to see how things are going to open up. What is it going to look like now? And especially for those of you planning incentives, it's always helpful to know where your attendees want to go. So Laura will be speaking to us today, telling us a little bit more about what to expect now. I'm sure many of you will have questions for Laura as we go, so we'll be using the chat feature. For questions, go ahead and type them as you think of them, and then Laura will answer those at the end of her presentation. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Laura Madrid.
Thank you, Jennifer. What an honor to be invited to speak with you all. The meetings and events segment is something that I also am passionate about and have some experience in my hotel background. For the past 10 years, though, I've been in the leisure segment running my own travel advisory. And I'm long-term friends with several of the members of Jennifer's team, but it's fun to be joining you all today. Without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, or attempt to here. How'd it work?
So we see your black screen, Now we don't see your presentation yet.
Okay, here we go. Let's get there.
Perfect.
Super. And let me set it on present. Great. Hopefully that worked.
Yes. Thanks,
Thank
Laura.
you. So I'm going to speak fast and furiously and share a little bit of insight about what I'm seeing in the travel industry, primarily in the luxury segment for leisure. I am not an epidemiologist, nor a scientist, nor a political scientist. Really, I'm just a travel advisor, and I try and read as much as I can about what's happening out there. It is confusing at best. I've spoken and listened in to a lot of expert panelists and derived some of my own opinions about what they've said. So I'm looking forward to sharing just a little bit of insight about what I'm seeing. First and foremost, it is confusing and it's difficult to say when travel will start again. That's the first question everybody's asking you, and certainly my clients are asking me. A couple of dry facts, really. There's this testing thing. Everyone's talking about testing, and that alone can be confusing, but a big reason why borders and policies are not being clear on when we'll open up. So there's antibody versus diagnostic testing. Antibody is sort of the fingerprint the robber leaves in your house. It lets you know if you've had COVID-19, and then diagnostic tells you if you've currently have it. Both tests are being used, but it's not exactly clear about how data is being derived. So the data is unreliable. Case counts can be misleading. If someone in a country or a city is testing a lot, it might appear that they have, exponential cases of COVID-19. There's also a problem with false negatives. So policy and science are not the same. Cases, are often political. And while we're trying to get the economy started, rightfully so, science sometimes is suggesting that maybe we're not ready. And so everyone has different opinions on that. The models as well can be somewhat misleading because they're based on assumptions and will really just be a method to give us an idea of where we're going, but it's not necessarily fact. So I'd like to just review a couple of potential trajectories about where we are going. And these are trajectories that I've actually, I'm moving my panel because it does impede some of my notes here. Here we go. Hold on, just trying to remove my panel, my gang. Hold on. Okay, I just removed my participants. So thank you. Getting to my next page here. All right, scenario one. We'll have recurring peaks of similar size over the next 12 to 18 months until a vaccine's ready or more people are exposed. Travel during this time will ebb and flow based on the social distancing measures, but people will start to relax. Scenario two is we'll have a second wave of cases and deaths later this year, followed by smaller waves, sort of like what happened during the Spanish flu. And in this case, the virus would be worse in peak two, but better next year. And then the other scenario is we've peaked, travel is going to ramp up again, and this thing is on its way, to being over. This is the least realistic of them. So I'm going to give you a lot of outlook. It's not all positive, and I'm not intending to be doom and gloom, but I think having some idea of facts and then obviously some ideas of where we can be going. So in terms of business travel, some Fortune 500 CEOs are saying that they don't expect business travel to ever return to what were pre-pandemic levels. The former Spirit Airlines CEO estimates travel in business segment will fall permanently 5 to 10%. Sanofi CEO said the one-time meeting will probably disappear. 92% of corporate travel managers are saying their employers have canceled or suspended all domestic travel, period. Amex global business travel sales reportedly fell 70% year over year in March. And then, of course, we're all hearing about this growing work from home movement where tech companies like Facebook, Twitter, Spotify are saying that they are going to move that direction indefinitely. Not all business travel is going to disappear, especially at the higher rungs of the corporate ladder. Of course, closing multi-million-dollar deals and takeovers does require an in-person contact. The area that I most can talk to you about, however, is the luxury leisure travel segment. And that segment is always the quickest to return, which is what Jennifer had alluded to. We should feel confident that if it's not this year, there still will be a burning desire to travel and explore the world, and it will be coming soon. Desire for more personalized private experiences, private transit, yacht charters, villa rentals, remote experiences that feel like adventures are going to be what people are asking for. Now, there are destination considerations. Domestic travel may seem safer and psychologically appear more comfortable to most people, so that's going to come back first. Drive holidays, we were just talking amongst our group earlier, they are definitely on the rebound. They call it the year of the car, and gas is cheaper than ever. Hard-hit areas will be slower to come back. So if you think about areas like Spain, Italy, Russia, China, even the USA, those are considered areas that were really adversely affected by COVID-19 and maybe slower to come back because of a perception. Countries that might perform well with COVID, that have performed well with COVID, with handling of it, like Iceland, New Zealand, Croatia, those are areas where people are feeling confident about. Less dense areas will be more appealing. Think about ranch holidays, deserted or private beaches or islands, private yachts and villas, and resorts that have standalone units or residences. Those will all be in high demand. There's a new terminology called travel bubbles that are already coming out. Australia and New Zealand, for example, have created one. There are travel bubbles in the Baltics. There's discussion of travel bubbles between, China and South Korea and Taiwan. So there are different areas where people can travel freely within specific zones. There are some Western European countries that are working on something as well. Cruises, now that's a big question mark because cruises unfortunately get a really bad rap, and particularly during COVID-19 they have. There's nothing necessarily to suggest that they are worse places, that cruises are worse places to be for COVID-19, but because of circumstances and media, they definitely did get a bad rap. I don't think they'll ever go away. I think that traditional cruisers and even older people will continue, but probably younger people and people that have not cruised have probably gotten a bit of a bad perception about them. Boutique may feel better. I mean, just anything boutique, whether it's a smaller boat, a smaller hotel, a smaller restaurant, anything that's not sort of large crowds may feel a little bit better. Places like Vegas, I feel will take a little bit longer to rebound. Then there's the individual considerations. Of course, we all know older adults may be more concerned about traveling, and people with underlying health issues. We're finding family units are traveling together quite a bit more. So this particular summer, I'm getting a lot of requests for families that want to stick together, and they're not inviting friends, and it's not couples traveling with other couples as much as, again, family units. Changing seasonality is something that will be very interesting with schools. We're already hearing about schools perhaps not even starting in the fall. We're hearing about schools starting early, but then closing at Thanksgiving. What this means is our traditional travel segments for the leisure guest may be different than we've had in the past, where everyone's traveling at Christmas and summer and spring break. Gap years are on the rise. I've read that 18% of high school seniors have chosen to do a gap year next year as opposed to going to college, given COVID-19. And then, of course, personal comfort level and tolerance. This is something that everybody will assess as a risk factor in a different way. If you think about 9/11, or if you think about even the terrorism that we saw in Europe, last year, some people just weren't going to travel there. Others didn't even think twice. So again, it's a personal consideration. I'd like to talk about country travel policies. This is where things get really kind of confusing. Travel bans can be politically motivated. They can also be biased against countries that have a negative epidemiological characteristic. I can never say that word correct. What that means is if a country is perceived to not have handled the virus well, citizens from that country may not be as welcome. So while the United States, we tend to typically be the guests that are most welcome because we have the dollars and are big spenders when it comes to luxury travel, I think some countries will be concerned about opening their borders to us. Border screenings are getting ramped up in terms of temperature checks on arrival or rapid testing on arrival. There's a lot of talk about countries instituting 14-day quarantines, whether it's on arrival to a destination or returning back to the home country. Obviously, that's not very convenient for most. There's discussions of fit-to-fly certificates or immunity passports with different degrees of concern if they really work. We talked about travel bubbles. And, you know, there's talk about the CDC possibly ranking countries for health and safety, just as currently we have being done by the State Department as related to political stability. So lots of factors to take into consideration. Here's an example for Iceland. They currently allow visitors from the Schengen zone, countries in Europe, to come only, but they must also quarantine for 14 days. Starting June 15th, hooray, all visitors will be allowed to Iceland, and they can choose a 14-day quarantine, testing for COVID-19 on arrival, or present a cleared health certificate as approved by the Icelandic government. So the bottom line is they are opening up under certain conditions. The other thing is all guests will have to install a tracing application on their smartphone called the Rakning C19. So again, using technology to help guests get to Iceland, but also maintain their exemplary handling of the COVID-19 crisis. So air travel. There's no evidence, I'm told, from several experts that you're likely to get a virus on an airplane, more so than anywhere else. Obviously, risk is higher because you're inside and you're around more people, but that can take place in a lot of areas. Long haul flights may be a little bit more dangerous because they're saying that longer exposure means increased risk. What life looks like in airports, planes, and ground handling will all look very different. Probably most of us haven't been on an airport, in an airport or an airplane for a while, but those that have will agree that it's not what it used to be. Airlines are really putting out a lot of guidelines trying to instill confidence in travelers. As you know, private air travel is obviously a segment for the luxury market that will definitely increase, and we're seeing huge demand for that. Travelers are also paying up to social distance, basically buying a row of seats or buying that middle seat next to them so that they don't have to be next to someone. So travel is going to be slower. It's going to take a lot longer for planes to turn around. It's no longer, you know, bump down, get everybody off, get the food service in, clean the bathrooms and get going again. Now it's going to be a huge sanitizing process, which is great. Gosh, I mean, I wish flights were always this clean, but it means a lot less flights in the air. It means less people in the seats, and it means travel and air travel especially will become more expensive. Delta is a great example. They've been super, I think, key with leading the way as far as US carriers, but they're now requiring masks from the moment you walk in to the moment you get to your destination. Of course, wiping all surfaces throughout the day, plexiglass shields between their staff and guests, safety distance decals noted throughout the floors so you're remembering to keep 6 feet, electrostatic spraying at gate, jetway, plane, an extensive cleaning checklist, even authority to hold flights if cleaning is not done correctly. Boarding will be from the back to the front, so forget that status. That's not going to help you get on first. And they're limiting it to 10 people at a time. In many cases, snack bags will be given instead of in-flight service. And then they are capping their sales at 60% capacity with the middle seats blocked, and then an air recirculation system every 10 to 30 times per hour. And then deboarding as well, encouraging social distancing by making those announcements. TSA regulations, this literally just came out yesterday, and I'm sure is going to be a lot more informative soon, but basic process that they are now instituting is guests will scan their own boarding pass. Passengers may need to remove their prohibited items themselves from their luggage at screening. The 3.4 ounce ruling has been changed to 12 ounces, I think in an attempt to allow people to bring their hand sanitizers and stop checking as much luggage at the screening process. Meals and snacks, which guests are encouraged to bring now because there's no food on planes in many cases, have to be separated from luggage and put into clear plastic bags. And even when loading your items onto security trays, they're asking you not to put phones and keys and such in the actual basket, but directly into your luggage. COVID-19 has been affected pretty adversely at TSA checkpoints, and so they're trying to assist with that. So let's talk about hotels a minute. Hotels are obviously really instituting a lot of policies to make guests feel comfortable and want them to come and stay. And as people, we can also say we're a little tired of our homes and the service we're getting here. So, getting out to a hotel is probably on everyone's mind in some regard. What they're doing is minimizing staff to patron and patron to patron guest contact as much as possible. Looking at how they can automate check-in, check-out, and having personless lobbies in some cases. I know it sounds just all a bit dreary, but unfortunately, that's just some of the things that are having to happen in order to make people feel comfortable that they're limiting, contact. Occupancies are also being controlled in many cases. Increasing laundry services and reducing soft goods in the rooms that can't be laundered. Avoiding elevators. Guests have an option in some cases to avoid elevators or perhaps avoid some hotels that have elevators. So again, trying to not put themselves in enclosed spaces when they can. Balconies and open air options are very much in demand, including cabanas. Plastic partitions are being used at pools, on beaches, also in between restaurant tables. And then some hotels are also offering rapid testing for staff and guests. And also increasing time between the reselling of a guest room. Sometimes, and I'll give you an example in a moment, I've seen a hotel that is only selling the guest room every 48 hours. Spa time as well. When you're using a spa room, they're keeping maybe an appointment time in between treatments so that they can get in and really sanitize the room. And then gym as well. Dining, we've already seen this in some restaurants, but a lot of hotels as well are only offering room service, disposable dishware, limited wait staff. Buffets, they're almost something of the past. They're saying they don't know if they'll come back, at least for a few years. Outdoor seating is really in high demand. Any place to keep guests out of air conditioning when possible. Reduced occupancy and table spacing, cabanas and private dining. I've seen some very chic restaurants institute these clear plastic shower curtains between restaurant tables. So, anything goes. We're being creative out there from what I see. Electronic menus and even asking guests to call in their order before they come to the restaurant. An example that I've seen recently is Hotel Toiny in St. Barths. This is a very chic Relais and Chateau property. It has 28 units. They have reopened calling themselves Club Toiny. They're only going to be selling 14 of their units at any given time. So in essence, maintaining a 50% occupancy, and they are maintaining 48 hours between selling rooms to give any virus that they're not able to physically see go away, dissipate. They've got private pools. Their restaurants and beach clubs are only for the hotel guest. The spa and gym are only to be used privately and by reservation. So there's ways that hotels can make the experience even more attractive for guests. Okay, so what does 2021 look like? There is pent-up demand, let me tell you, and I know that you probably are feeling the same way with your industry, but things that have canceled, many of those things have moved to 2021. And leisure travel very much is the same. I spoke to the president of a river cruise company, Uniworld, the other day, and she told me that typically this time for next year, they've got 10% occupancy on the books, but for 2021, they've already got 30%. So that tells me, yes, guests have moved their trips, but it also tells me that those that aren't able to book trips right now are booking for next year. The cost of travel, as we talked about, could increase significantly. So those that are thinking they're going to get a bargain deal, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. Forced lower occupancies, more staff required in order to maintain a COVID-19 free environment, slower turnaround, those things lead to more expensive travel. Even museums, if you think about like Italy, the Vatican, or the Uffizi, or go to Paris to the Louvre, you always see these huge lines about and the places are packed. Now those museums are going to be sold by timed tickets. No groups. So you think about the amount of people that are being able to get through these amazing attractions is going to be vastly reduced, which means it has to be more expensive. Private usage, buyouts, those types of things will be on people's mind as they look to travel in 2021. As I talked about briefly, my background is the luxury leisure segment. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things that are, being asked in my realm these days. I haven't sold one of these yet, but these socially distanced safaris are all the rage right now. An 8-day safari, for example, without coming into contact with another human, except for your private butler, your guide, your chef, and whomever else you bring along. These socially distanced safaris can range at $60,000 per person. But down to earth, ranch holidays are in high demand. A lot of guests are heading out west this summer here in the US. These are, this is Dunton Hot Springs and Telluride. They've got 12 standalone cabins in a luxury, fantastic ranch on thousands of acres on a river. Resorts with residences are in big demand. Here's the Little Nell in Aspen, which is a favorite for our clients in summer and winter, and Chileno Bay in Cabo. These are just examples of resort properties that have residences. So guests can have the restaurants, the spa, the ambiance, the fitness if they want, but if they also want to be just their own little unit in their residence, that is something that is very popular. Private villas to be able to take over. Here's just one example of Sweet Bocas in Panama, which is absolutely stunning and very remote. Private islands like Musha Cay and the Exumas. Resorts with airstrips where private aircraft can get into are also quite popular. Here's Mystique. And nature destinations. Being out in nature, out of the cities, there's a tendency away from urban environments in general. So places with a lot of space are in high demand. And then of course, put an exclusive use home like Deplar Farm in Iceland on top of it. And it is just the perfect scenario. Private beach destinations like the Maldives are in high demand. And our national parks. We were just talking earlier about let's rent RVs and see America. This is something that's on a lot of people's minds. Again, those drive holidays and seeing all of the beauty that's right here in our own backyard. So let's talk briefly about over-tourism. As you know, this has been our biggest concern for the past decade at least, about how the world is really becoming over-touristed. In 1990, international tourist arrivals were 435 million, jumped to 1.4 billion in 2018. Air travel is 3% of all carbon emissions. We always hear about these amazing places. Think about Venice, where all the locals no longer can afford to live there. Think about the cultural sites of Angkor Wat or Machu Picchu. And as I mentioned earlier, the Vatican and the Louvre, where you can barely get in to see, the Mona Lisa. So degradation of the environment and the infrastructure is the diminished travel experience, the wear and tear on built heritage, and the negative impact on the residents are real issues that we've been battling. Yet 10% of the world's GDP lies in tourism. So what happened virtually overnight with COVID-19 in the past 90 days? Well, some pros, cleaner water in Venice and the Mediterranean. We can see from Nepal and Kenya, Kilimanjaro and Everest. We've got a real concern for all these vulnerable communities. I mean, travel's been an effective way to lift people up, especially women, youth. It's a powerful motivator for environmental protections and heritage preservation. All of these places really rely on visitors. They'll be devastated as airlines slash routes and travelers stop coming. We've already read articles about poaching on the rise in Africa, logging and deforestation in the Amazon, and the UN warning of epic famines due to COVID-19. So the crystal ball, where do we go with all this information? Well, what we envision, at least in my opinion, is we'll start seeing rings of concentric circles. First, we're getting out into our own backyards. We'll start then traveling domestically, gradually further abroad. This era of fast travel, like fast food, it's cheap and easy, but not necessarily nourishing. So how will this change? I think we need to find a pendulum somewhere between over and under tourism. Perhaps taking fewer trips, but diving deeper into the places we visit, staying longer, considering our time and impact. No matter why we travel, perhaps it will become more meaningful. And that holds true for business travel, for meetings, or for leisure travel. How can we really be more effective when we do take that trip? So the role of the travel professional, congratulations, you just got a promotion. there's really a whole new set of responsibilities and challenges. Your values increase dramatically as you try and make sense of this chaos for clients. And it is daily chaos. There's still not a lot of answers. There's a challenge to stay on top of this information. How long does it take to process passports now? When can we even apply for one now? When about global entry renewal? When will we start being able to get appointments again? What documentation is required to enter? How about returning home? Can I get back in? What policies do hotels, TSA, airlines, borders, and venues require? What does open really mean? Travelers need their travel professionals more than ever. I hope that my presentation wasn't doom and gloom. It was really to uplift you. I personally am taking this time to innovate, to recharge, stay positive, know my value, and improve my business model. This time's been something that I've never expected or counted on. I don't necessarily relish it, but I wouldn't say it's the worst thing ever. There can be positive changes from COVID-19 and what's happening to our world. Thank you.
Wow, Laura, your passion, your knowledge, it's just really impressive, and thank you for sharing all of it with us. I was taking notes here and I just had to stop. So with your permission, can we share your deck with the people on the call today?
Sure, absolutely, not a problem. And it was fast and furious, but I forgot to put my timer on, so I didn't know if I'd overspoken. So thank you.
I don't think anyone felt you talked too much at all. We are open to questions, so if anyone has questions that they want to ask, please submit them through the chat. I really appreciate your approach. You know, it was a little tough love, you know, but very realistic and probably what we needed to hear amidst all the clutter and the noise right now. So thank you for giving us the facts and then also presenting us with some really neat creative solutions. I love the gems that you were sharing at the end about domestic and international places that are now options that may not have been considered before. I know for the planners, the last couple of slides could have been overwhelming. You know, you've got a lot on your plate right now. Just figuring out this whole virtual meeting thing is a lot now, becoming such experts on individual destinations. It's a lot on your plate, and we appreciate that. And that is something that we were happy to help with as well. You talked a little bit about the travel bubbles, and that was intriguing. What makes it safe within certain countries? How are they picking who they bubble with?
Well, think about, you know, everybody's been self-isolating or maybe having their own little bubble too. I mean, we like to hang out in the backyard with some of our neighbors who we feel comfortable with. And I think it's the same thing with countries. If Australia and New Zealand both think they're doing the same thing and have, you know, a similar handling of cases, they might feel comfortable traveling amongst themselves. Or, you know, if we look at, I think it's Cyprus and Greece and one other country has also decided that they have similar, you know, caseloads and travelers, and they can maintain their borders. They've agreed politically that it makes sense. So I don't know what makes a bubble, but I think it's just like considering who you feel comfortable hanging out with during this time.
True, true. Have you heard of anyone wanting to bubble with the US? Like, is there a possibility of us bubbling with Canada or Mexico or any islands?
I haven't. I mean, obviously, it would make most sense to have a North America bubble of sorts, whether it be Canada, Mexico. But you know, it's hard. It's hard to say. That's
Yep.
A lot of it's politically motivated, and it obviously just takes it takes a lot of discussing. I haven't heard that.
Understand. We've got some great comments here thanking you for your presentation, and just wow is right. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat section.
Yeah, don't be shy, as I love a good discussion, and I think it's fun to have everyone participate. I know we're all sitting at our home offices, and even if you have a comment or no question's a bad question, I think it's just fun to get people's opinions or perspective. That's the bummer of being a panelist, is you know, you're talking, but you're not getting anything back. So feel free to shout anything out.
Yep. Thanks, Laura. Just while people may be writing, thank you again for giving us your time today. We do hope that you've had a chance to kind of sit back and just listen for a little bit. We're having fun putting this Brain Break series together, and we've got a great lineup. Next week, we have Bart Berkey, who is an author and motivational speaker. He will be with us on the 3rd at 4 o'clock. And then future speakers, we have a general manager from a Ritz-Carlton hotel lined up. We have Breathworks coach. This is complete departure from the other speakers we've had. We wanted to provide some health and wellness opportunities as well. So look forward to that. And then we also have some other industry speakers and motivational speakers. So please feel free to pass the invitations along to any other planner friends that you may have. The more the merrier. So we do have a question here, and I will read it. It says, would the poor response to the COVID-19 on the US side, would that hinder the bubble with border countries?
I would guess anything, could hinder it. I mean, good relationships, like anything else, are really important to make any kind of international decision or treaty.
And, yep. Well, I think we have a quiet audience, so I think you've answered a lot of questions and just given us a tremendous amount to think about. So again, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laura. Thank you to everyone who has attended. I will send out an email tomorrow with the deck, and we look forward to staying in touch. Everyone be well.
Be safe.
Thank you.